Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock here in the United Kingdom. You're very welcome to spend your breakfast with us wherever you're watching us here on Sky News, right around the world this morning. Feeling the squeeze, higher gas bills for many families already facing universal credit cuts and a national insurance hike as energy companies fight for survival. The message to those firms, the price cap is here to stay. What's the Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng doing about it all? Quite a big job today. We'll ask him in just a second. Also, that sort of morning, it's all gone Pete Tong, 8:45, speaking to the DJ legend about how the music helps bring friends and family together. In addition, opening up about grief, dancers AJ and Curtis will be with me at 9:45 to tell us why they're encouraging all of us to talk about the experience of losing our loved ones. It's Tuesday, the 21st of September. Fears for the future as the Business Secretary tells energy companies the price cap is here to stay. Plus, what next for families and food supplies?
Criminally negligent. The government faces criticism after a data breach involving the details of 250 Afghan interpreters.
The Prime Minister will be here at the West Wing of the White House for an Oval Office meeting with President Biden. The pandemic and American commitments on climate change will top the agenda.
I'm at the US Embassy as British Airways reports a 700% increase in interest for US holidays after the country said it will welcome fully vaccinated passengers from the UK and the EU.
Questions over the whereabouts of Prince Andrew after a civil sexual assault lawsuit is delivered to his US lawyer. In the line of fire, lava oozes through the streets of La Palma, destroying houses as a volcano on the island continues to erupt. Morning, everybody. What lies in store for families this winter already feeling the squeeze from the planned universal credit cut and national insurance hike? Some are already experiencing higher gas bills as energy companies struggling with spiralling wholesale prices are forced to ask for bailouts. How many can survive to the end of the year? The Business Secretary says the price cap will remain. Good news for some customers, but bad news for smaller energy businesses. Kwasi Kwarteng is here. Hi.
Hello, Kay.
Good morning. What a challenging few days you've got ahead.
Well, it's been interesting, but we're very focused on trying to get through this.
OK, so talk to me about how big a crisis we're facing.
I think what your viewers have to understand is that every winter, a number of energy suppliers exit the market. They leave because they can't maintain their financial position. This year, the wholesale prices are going up very high. So the price at which they get gas is much higher. And of course, that puts more pressure on them. And that's why a number of these companies are saying that we should, some of them are saying we should lift the price cap. Some of them are saying that we should perhaps bail them out. And I've been very focused on three principles. I think firstly, we've got to look after customers. We've got to make sure there's a continuity of supply. And we've got to look after the most vulnerable and particularly elderly customers. That's my first priority. The second thing I've said is that I don't think we should be throwing taxpayers' money at companies which have been, let's face it, badly run. A number of these companies have been badly run. As I say, every year, between 5 and 8 companies exit the market. And I don't want to prop up failing companies. I don't want there to be a reward for failure. I don't think the taxpayer should be propping those up. And then the third principle is that, as you said in your header, the energy price cap is here to stay. I don't want to remove that. I don't want to go back to the old days where a very, very small number of companies were essentially pushing up prices and extorting lots of value from customers who had no choice.
Problem is that price cap policies can't cope with extremes, can they? That's the main issue. And it's a mistaken intervention, some would say, by a Conservative government to cap prices.
Yeah, that is an argument. But what we had before, only a few years ago, was a market where you had a very small number of companies that were charging very, very high prices. And that's why we brought in the price cap. And what the price cap has done is actually forced companies to innovate. There have been lots of new entrants, as we've seen. And now we're at a point where some of those new entrants are feeling the pressure, and some of them it may well be, have not been managed properly.
State-backed loans is an option.
There are lots of options. I mean, currently at the moment, and it's important people understand this, we have mechanisms in place. So there's a thing called SOLAR, which stands for the supplier of last resort, which means that if your energy company goes bust, the customers from that company will go to another company which can absorb the number of customers. These structures are already there. The issue this year, as you know, is that there may be more than the usual 5 to 8.
Couldn't it?
It won't be a house of cards, but there'll be more than 5 to 8. There could be more than 5 to 8. It's not happened yet. There could be more than 5 to 8 of the usual companies that exit. And we have to have a much more robust supply of last resort.
How many are you scheduled
facility.
for? What's your worst-case scenario on the number of companies that might
I'm
go
not going
under?
to put a number on that. As I say, most years, I mean, I've been energy minister for this is my third winter. 5 to 8 is generally what we've observed, and it could be worse than that. But I can't tell you the exact number.
So what's going to happen to all of those customers?
The customers, and this is my first principle, will have complete continuity of supply. So we will find energy suppliers. There will be energy suppliers for those customers, and that's what the supplier of last resort, the mechanism we already have in place, that's what it means.
Which is why you need to look to state-backed loans for some of those bigger companies to support those who are taking on extra customers.
Yeah, those are some of the ideas that are discussed. You're quite right, because it costs a company to absorb up to hundreds of thousands of customers from another company that's failed. That costs money, and there may well be a provision for some sort of loan. And that's been discussed, that's been widely reported.
OK, so when will you make decisions on that?
I'm speaking to small suppliers today. I spent the whole weekend speaking to the regulator. I spoke to larger suppliers, and we're getting a round table of smaller suppliers, and we want to get a full range of market opinion.
How have we find ourselves in this position?
I think that there have been extremely volatile commodity prices. Last year, we saw the oil price was at $20 one in April, roughly, and then it went up to 80, and it's come back down a bit. With gas prices this year, we've had, obviously, the COVID pandemic, huge demand coming out of Asia, and that's spiked the price. And that's one of the features of the post-COVID recovery.
Yeah. What about worst-case scenarios? You said yesterday in the House of Commons that it was alarmist to say that people would struggle to heat their homes in the winter months.
Yeah, so my thinking behind that, the reason I've said that, is that there are two issues here. There are gas prices, and then, of course, there's the security of supply, the idea that somehow we won't be able to get enough of the stuff. What I was trying to say yesterday, and what I said yesterday, was that security of supply is not an issue. We've got lots of diverse sources of gas. The structure of the market in terms of the energy suppliers, that is an issue, and that's what we've been talking about.
Well, you say that people won't struggle to heat their homes in the winter months, but of course they do already.
The issue I was saying, in terms of cost, but I'm just saying that there is continuity of supply. That was what I was focusing on. We're mixing up two things here.
Well, not really, because the bottom line is you can either heat your home or you can't.
No, there are reasons why. You can either heat it because it costs a lot of money, or you can't heat it because there simply isn't enough gas. And one of the concerns that was expressed yesterday was that we simply wouldn't have enough of the gas. We wouldn't have enough of the stuff to be able to heat our homes. And that was the misimpression, that was the myth, if you like, I was trying to bust yesterday.
Yeah, but the reason that people can't heat their homes is because they can't afford the gas.
Yes.
And obviously gas prices are going to go up, aren't they? You'll say that there's a price cap, but hundreds of thousands of people are about to come off their fixed-term tariffs, and their prices are going to go up.
So the price cap, as you know, has really kept prices down for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customers. The gas companies are saying, the energy companies are saying, they want to lift the price cap because they want to raise prices. But I've said that we're keeping the price cap.
Yeah, but my point is that people are coming off their fixed-term tariffs, and as a result, their prices could go up to, did I read something like £1,500 more?
No, I don't recognise.
So what figures do you recognise?
So I think that what will happen, and we've got to wait and see what happens to the market. We've got to wait and see what happens to the suppliers. But I've said, because of the cap and also in terms of trying to limit rises, we shouldn't be in a situation where people are paying the amount that you said.
So what is the worst-case scenario for people who are coming off those fixed-term tariffs?
I think that people should be able to find pricing which is very much in line with their old on their old tariff. But as you say, we've got to wait and see how many of the suppliers are affected. Clearly, there's a world of difference if, as is usually the case, 5 to 8 suppliers exit the market, leave, or if it's more than that.
And the figures in the FT yesterday saying, there could be dozens you don't recognise.
I don't recognise that. I mean, I'm just in terms of background, when I became energy minister more than 2 years ago, there were 65 suppliers. Today, the figure I think is about 55. I need to check that because there were obviously it fluctuates. Do I think that there has to be? Am I going to bail out all 55 of those companies if in an extreme case? No, I don't think we can do that because some of those companies, a handful of them, probably would have exited anyway. So I don't see why we would.
What's the criteria for bailing them out?
Well, we've got to look at their financial position. Some of these companies probably would have exited anyway, and there's no point.
So some of these businesses are just chancers. They like it when it's a sunny day, and when actually they find themselves in a position where they're not making money because of the price cap, then they come cap in hand to the government. Is that what you're...
That sometimes happens. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, as I said, every year that I've been in the job, 5 to 8 companies have exited the market for various reasons.
And the Conservative government is not going to bail businesses out like that?
I don't think it makes any sense to put taxpayers' money, your money, our money, to companies that have been badly run.
Are you going to bail out this business that makes carbon dioxide for the food industry but has had to close because it's just not financially viable at the moment?
We're definitely looking at trying to secure carbon dioxide supply. And
what does that look like?
Well, I think we're getting that. I mean, I spoke to the Chancellor yesterday. Spoken to the CEO of the business, an American man.
CF Industries.
Yep, Tony Will. Spoken to him twice. He flew over on Sunday. I spoke to him on Sunday, lunchtime. We didn't have a lunch, but we spoke very candidly about the situation of his company.
How did that conversation go?
It was a frank conversation. He said that the problem he had was that the natural gas price is much higher than the ammonia which he sells. So essentially what happened last week was that the plant down tools. And I said, of course, we've got to manufacture this CO2, and that's what we're talking about this week.
So we don't have much time as far as that's concerned?
It's pretty imminent, but I'm confident.
Today, tomorrow?
In the next this week, I hope we have a very clear plan to get the CO2 production going. I
mean, that's a pretty big deal if he's flying over to have a chat, especially given how challenging it is to fly at the moment. So did you get him to come so you could talk to him?
I didn't. He wanted to come and see see me in government. I went to the office. We had a very good conversation about the situation, and we're determined to...
But you made it clear that we can't not have these factories open?
That's a very clear steer that I gave him.
OK. And you think by the end of the week we'll have that sorted out? I
am very confident and hopeful that we can sort it out by the end of the week.
Isn't it somewhat frustrating that we find ourselves in a position where we're being held to ransom by a business like this? How could we have found ourselves in that position? Why didn't we see it coming?
We have lots of contingency plans. The gas distribution is very wide, but in this particular instance, the manufacture of CO2 was critically dependent on natural gas, where you've got skyrocketing prices. What we've done is we've looked at how we can get the production going again, and I'm hopeful, confident that we'll be able to do that. Because
it is time critical, as you're pointing out. I was reading just yesterday that pig farmers have got all these pigs that need to go to market, chicken farmers as well, and if they're not done by the end of the week, they have to slaughter all these animals and put them in landfill.
You're absolutely right, and that's why the carbon dioxide situation is critical, and that's why I spent all of yesterday.
And what are we going to do about that going forward to make sure that we're not finding ourselves in that position in future?
I think we have to have a diversity of sources of carbon dioxide. CFF isn't the only company that manufactures carbon dioxide.
So why are we so reliant on them?
They have a big share of the market. I said they weren't the only one, but they're a big part of the carbon dioxide market.
And as far as our gas supply is concerned, how concerned are we that the Russians are basically controlling how much gas we get and don't get? I think the levels are down to 20% of pre-pandemic levels.
I don't think that there's much concern, as far as we're concerned, from where we get our gas. Very little of our gas comes from Russia. 50% of it is sourced here in the UK, and 30% comes from Norway. And I spoke to the Norwegian energy minister yesterday, and she was very confident that supply from Norway was secure. They've also said in Norway that they're going to increase production, so they're going to increase capacity as of next week to make sure that we get the gas we need.
We're very reliable on reliant, I should say, on the spot market, though, aren't we? We don't seem to have the storage capability that we had previously. I think there was a place in the North Sea where closed in 2017. Was it 2017?
2017.
Yeah, and we don't have that big storage facility anymore, which means that we are very susceptible to the ranges in price.
Yeah, you've got to remember, Kay, it's a global...
That's something we should look at?
It's a global... I look at these things all the time. It's a global price spike. So every country, certainly in Europe... I'm
talking particularly about storage. Should we be looking at storage?
I completely understand that, but I'm just trying to put a context.
No, I understand.
This spike is completely unprecedented. We've had a global pandemic. There's a huge uptick in demand, and everyone is trying to get the same sources of gas. And that's what's caused the spike. Now, I think in this situation, you're right, we need to look at our energy strategy going forward. I think it's been fairly resilient. If you look at renewables, if you look at the range of sources of our electricity, it's pretty wide, much wider than a number of other countries. And that's something that is a credit to the UK.
One of the other options, I suppose, to keep people's gas bills under control or fuel bills is to pause the green levy. Is that something you might think about?
No, I haven't. I mean, you'll appreciate also that that's an issue for the Chancellor, because it's a fiscal tax.
Yeah, but you can speak to him.
Yeah, I do speak to him a lot. But I think the green levy is pretty much in its infancy. And actually, we've been very successful at moving away from fossil fuels to renewable sources of power, and that's a British success story.
I don't know if we have a climate show here on Sky News that we run.
I've been on it a couple of times.
Yeah, 6:30 every evening, and we have sort of like a projection of how much fuel is being used every single day and every single minute. At the moment, we're using a lot of fossil fuels. That makes the price a bit more concerning, doesn't it? Just looking at it, actually, as we see, 57%. That's significantly higher than what it normally is.
Yeah, that's in terms of gas. You'll know that in that the coal figure has gone down hugely. So even just 8 years ago, we had 40% was from coal burning, essentially, and today that's about 2%. So we've done a good job in moving away from coal, but you're right that natural gas is still a big part of the energy supply.
OK, not something that we can worry about just at the moment. We need to try and make sure that we get the supply as best we can. I wonder if I can talk to you about this MOD data breach before I let you go. What can you tell us about this data breach regarding Afghan interpreters? That is very concerning.
It's very concerning. And as far as I know, I do know, the Secretary of State for Defence has launched an inquiry into this. Clearly, that's something that is deeply worrying. I think it will cause a lot of concern, certainly with allies and interpreters and friends in Afghanistan, and I hope we can get to the bottom of it. That's all I can say about this.
OK. Are you worried that lives could be at risk as a result?
Well, look, I think it's very difficult when people, data is breached and people know what others have been doing. But let's get to the bottom of the investigation.
So that's a yes, really?
No, I just want to say that I think it's a serious situation.
Just before I let you go, just reassure my viewers, if you would, this morning. I mean, you sat in a relaxed fashion, you're very calm, very levelled voice, but a lot of people will be worried about heating their homes and putting food on the table over the next few weeks. I
think the next few days are going to be quite challenging, but I'm very confident.
Well, say critical and then stopped.
No, I said they're quite challenging. Don't put words into my mouth.
No, I'm asking you. It wasn't a statement.
But I've been in post. I've been energy minister for more than 2 years now. I've been Secretary of State now for nearly a year. I've spoken to many of the major players. I've spoken to the regulator, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to get through this, and we'll look back and say that we did a good job in terms of getting through what was a global situation. It was a difficult global situation, and I think in the UK we'll be able to navigate our way through it.
And what can we do as end-of-the-line users? What can we do to try to help in the meantime?
I think people need to look at their gas prices, and they need to look at what else is out there potentially in the market. I think people need to be aware that there are lots and lots of suppliers, and they are varying quality. Like in any market where you've got 50 or 60 different suppliers, they're not all up to the same level. Some of them are well capitalised, well run, others are less so. And I think consumers probably need to take a little bit more of an active interest. I don't think we should try and all be gas experts, but just in terms of energy bills, just to see what's out there.
Is this the biggest challenge you faced in your
faced
2
a
years.
number of
In your
challenges.
2
I mean,
years
there was,
this year.
There was an energy blackout 2 weeks into the job, and commuters will remember, I think 1 million commuters were essentially blacked out. There was no electricity, the trains weren't moving. That was in August 2019. We had a whole issue with fracking, and 2.9 on the Richter scale. So in an energy brief,
How does this compare?
This is very serious, and also it's got a global dimension to it in a way that some of those other crises didn't. But it's a very volatile market. There's a lot going on in the global economy. You've mentioned Russia. There's geopolitics. There's so many different strands, so many different forces acting on this market, and it's a challenging and stimulating job that I do.
I have to let you go, but it's good to talk to you. I'm glad I'm sat here and not there today. Challenging few days ahead for you. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Kwateng. Thank you. Just a reminder, if you want to catch up on any of our interviews, you can watch the programme when you're out and about this morning. You can find us on the mobile app, or you can go to our website, and the live blog is there as well. And you can catch up on the interviews on my Twitter as well, if you would like to, and that is @KBurley. Lot to go out there. Helen Ann, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, lots to go out there. I think the Minister really wanted to make clear that people should feel reassured. I think that message came across very clearly, didn't it? He wanted to tell us and the viewing public that customers are going to be protected, that the vulnerable will be looked after this winter, that price cap that keeps energy prices in check, that's going to remain, and that crucially that taxpayers' money is not going to be put towards bailing out some of these big companies. But certainly I think watching that, some energy companies, some consumers as well, would have wanted potentially to hear a bit more. There was lots of potential solutions and interventions being discussed yesterday, a bad bank potentially to take on some of those customers from companies that had collapsed, the potential for state-backed loans, still an option potentially, other interventions as well. And I think some people will have said, reassurance is one thing and that's good, but we want to hear more, Minister. There was a sort of acknowledgement there that there is some structural problems in the energy industry, and a sense, I think, that they want to try and address some of that. And there were, I think, some more positive noises as well about that CO2 crisis, a sense that a deal on that or some sort of intervention will be coming this week. As we know, the sort of meat and poultry pig industry have said that we could be seeing shortages on the shelves.
Transatlantic flights to try and sort it out.
Indeed, absolutely. And we could be seeing those shortages in a matter of days, potentially. But look, this crisis will continue to escalate. The Minister has acknowledged that a number more small companies might go under. And we have to remember that while he says people are going to be protected, lots of consumers may feel, as their national insurance is going up, as their universal credit uplift comes to an end, as furlough comes to an end, they may feel not very protected themselves in their lives.
Fancy his job over the next couple of days, that's for sure. Helen Ann, thanks so much indeed. We were also discussing with the Minister, weren't we, that the government is facing criticism from all sides after the Ministry of Defence confirmed a data breach involving the details of 250 Afghan interpreters. Ali Fortescue is down at the Ministry of Defence for us this morning. Hi, Ali, you heard what the Minister said. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's very serious. You heard there he wouldn't say that lives were under threat, but that is certainly the warning from many cross-party politicians today. These are 250 Afghan interpreters, translators that have been working with the British Army, and we understand they're being emailed as part of a scheme that was about relocating people in Afghanistan. Unclear right now whether all these people are indeed in Afghanistan or in the UK, but their names, it appears, have been copied into an email which has given their details, in some cases email addresses and even profile pictures that have been openly copied in. So it's a hugely significant data breach, and worth saying, the second for the Ministry of Defence. You remember back in June there were papers that were found at a bus stop, sensitive security information. So they have faced cross-party criticism, including from Johnny Mercer, who is the former Defence Minister. He has tweeted to say the truth on how we've treated our Afghan interpreters will out. All the backslapping over pitting, that is the operation to get people out of Afghanistan, marks a criminally negligent performance by the Ministry of Defence and the Home Office on doing our duty to these people. I reiterate the vast majority have been left behind, probably moving house again tonight. So very serious warning there from Johnny Mercer about the impact on those still in Afghanistan.
OK. Ali, for now, thanks so much indeed, Ali Fortescue, speaking to us live from the Ministry of Defence this morning. Now, tending to the special relationship at 7:30, we'll be speaking to a former British ambassador to the United States, Sir David Manning, as Joe Biden prepares to welcome Boris Johnson to the White House. Ambitious and excited for the future at 7:45, speaking to the Children's Commissioner about why many young people remain optimistic despite having lived through COVID.
Live when you learn, they'll always hate me for my tone, for the shade of my skin and not the courage in my bones. Now I'm misunderstood and I'm feeling like Nina Simone. The way I told the world would have thought that I was Sims. See her on stage, I know that women can be kings.
Stormzy's Heroes at 9:30 will be joined by the author of comic book telling inspirational stories of 50 people chosen by the rapper, and one of those he says he has inspired him, I should say. The US President Joe Biden will become Boris Johnson's, will certainly welcome him at the White House later on today in their first meeting after a summer which strained transatlantic ties with the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports from Washington.
It's been just 3 months since the Prime Minister and the President last met at the G7 in Cornwall. But what a long, tricky summer it's been. Transatlantic relationships have been strained, the pandemic endures, and November's high-stakes climate change summit is ever closer. The President's focus in New York will be to mend alliances fractured by Afghanistan and to tackle the extraordinary fallout with France over Australian submarines. He'll deliver a key speech at the UN this morning. With Johnson and Biden both in New York, their meeting could easily have been held there too, but instead they'll have it in Washington. Holding it here at the White House carries much more weight. That special relationship, which has been put to the test in recent weeks, looks that much more convincingly special with a meeting held at the Oval Office. On Afghanistan, Prime Minister Johnson took flak from an American decision and a chaotic exit. And yet now, speaking to an American audience on NBC, he was reluctant to criticize the president.
America has been there for 20 years. And it's a respectable argument to say that enough is enough. You can't endlessly subcontract the government of your country to other people. There's got to be some sort of system.
So do you agree with the decision? It sounds like you do.
Look, I mean, could we have done it a bit differently? Maybe we could.
On the pandemic, the White House announcement yesterday that it will lift the travel ban in November removes one point of tension. It allows space for the two leaders to focus on the bigger picture, vaccinating the world. The white flag's a stark reminder of the cost of the pandemic. Each represents a life lost. And then there's the climate. President Biden's climate envoy hinted to Sky News that America will meet Britain's calls for more funds for poorer countries to fight climate change.
The United States will do its part.
So you're hoping President Biden will add more funds this week?
I'm not hoping. I'm telling you, stay tuned to the president's speech.
The optics of these moments through the years are of course important, but it's the results that matter. On climate, Boris Johnson may get something to take with him to Glasgow. But on that all-important post-Brexit trade deal, well, don't hold your breath. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
And Sir David Manning, former British ambassador to the United States, is with us now. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning, Sir David. And that's the bottom line, isn't it? A lot of this is window dressing unless you can get this Brexit deal with the US.
Well, I think these meetings are always important. So I don't think a bilateral meeting between the Prime Minister and the President is just window dressing. And I agree with Mark Stone, your correspondent, that the fact that it's going to be in Washington is important. But of course, you're right. It's what comes out of these meetings that matters in the long run. And there are some very big things on this agenda today.
Particularly for you?
Well, I think the things that I'd be looking for are what is going to come out of their discussions about the American commitment on climate change. The COP26 meeting that's taking place in Glasgow shortly is very important. Certainly for the success of British diplomacy, but for the future of the whole climate agenda. And what the President has to say to the Prime Minister today is going to be crucial to the success or otherwise of those talks, I think. And there is repair work to do as well. I mean, let's be candid. It's been a very tricky summer, as your correspondent said. I think the governments was shaken by the way in which the United States decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. We were left with a debacle, 20 years almost to the day after 9/11. And this is not exactly how we expected this administration to behave when it talked about strengthening alliances. So there has been a shock to confidence. It's important that that is now rebuilt. And I also hope that they will talk about ways in which it's possible to repair the strained relationship now with France over the important new arrangements for security in the Pacific. It's obviously a very important step forward that there is this new agreement to contain the Chinese rise through this new submarine agreement with Australia. But at the same time, we have to accept that the French have had a nasty shock over this, and we need them very much to help our security in NATO. So there are some very big strategic issues for the two leaders to discuss, I think.
Yeah, levels of cooperation are potentially challenged at the moment, some people might say. There was a recent poll, apparently 7 in 10 Americans believe that we need them more than the other way around. They need us. There we go. I got there eventually. And in addition to that, we're opening this travel corridor from November. It seemed to come somewhat as a surprise to the Brits. So there isn't necessarily that communication that was there previously.
Well, I think we've been asking, as I understand it, for that corridor to be reopened for months, and so have our colleagues in the European Union. I mean, reconnecting North America to Europe, as far as we're concerned, is vital for all sorts of reasons, for economic reasons and trade reasons and tourist reasons. So I think it's very welcome, and it has, of course, a high symbolism at a time when we're hoping that we can get over the bumps of the last few months. The fact that we can now travel to one another's countries without restriction is, if you like, a visual expression of that. So I'm sure it's very welcome, politically as well as economically.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't disagree with you on that at all. I suppose my point was that it seemed to come as somewhat of a surprise after all of the campaigning.
Yes, no, I quite agree with you. I think it clearly, from what one gathers, it has come as a surprise, but perhaps it's because the American administration decided to, save it up as something positive to present when in the margins of meeting their European counterparts at the UN General Assembly.
What do you think Boris Johnson would see as a win when he comes home on the plane from the United States?
Well, I think his big hope must be that there is this commitment from the president to do more on climate change, particularly to contribute to a fund for the developing countries as they have to take the strain of new arrangements. So I think that would certainly be a big win and would be a big help for in preparing for COP26 in a few weeks' time, which is not a straightforward meeting. It's a very big and difficult meeting. I think it's also, if I can put it this way, the dog that doesn't bark, which is that there is nothing difficult that comes out of this meeting over the whole question of the US administration's attitude to our, the Northern Ireland agreement with the Northern Ireland Protocol, as part of the Brexit agreement. There's no secret, and Nancy Pelosi, the leader of the Democrats in Congress, said in London last week that they are very keen indeed that the United Kingdom and the EU find a solution to their dispute over the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that there won't be a free trade agreement between the United Kingdom and the United States if that relationship is not resolved. So I think that is also an area which I imagine they will want to talk about. And I hope that they will find that they can find some kind of common ground on that. But I'm sure that's also an important element in these discussions.
Yeah, a lot for them to cram in today, isn't there? Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning,
Thank you.
former Ambassador. Thank you. I'm sure the pandemic will come up as well when the two men are speaking at the White House. Let me give you the latest figures as far as the UK is concerned on the COVID data. 14,500 first doses of a COVID vaccine were given in the latest 24-hour period. 35,000 people received their second dose. Almost 45 million people are now fully vaccinated. 36,100 new cases of coronavirus reported. Further 49 people, sadly, have died. Takes the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test to 135,252. Riot police have been in a tense standoff with protesters in Melbourne who are angry about a government mandate for construction workers to have the COVID-19 vaccine. Sky News Australia reporter Julia Bradley joining us now from Melbourne. Hello to you, thanks for joining us. What's going on?
Okay, we've seen extraordinary scenes unfold here in Melbourne today. There's been about a 6-hour standoff between police and protesters, as you say, over this decision that was made by Victoria's government to mandate COVID vaccinations for the construction workforce, which comprises about 300,000 people here in Victoria. We've seen protests become quite violent today. Police have been using tear gas, rubber bullets. They've been using pepper spray to try to disperse the crowd. The demonstrations began here at the CFMEU headquarters, which is the head office for Australia's biggest construction union, where scenes turned quite ugly yesterday. Protests then went over to Victoria's Parliament, where police lined the steps of that Parliament. They then went over to Flinders Street Station, which is one of our biggest train stations here in Melbourne. But quite extraordinarily, we then saw protesters take over the Westgate Freeway, a major freeway here in Melbourne. Traffic was banked up for about 6 kilometres. Traffic came to a complete standstill because of these protests. They're angry about the fact that vaccinations are going to be mandatory, but also about the fact that Victoria's government made a snap decision late last night to close the industry for the next 2 weeks.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks a lot. Obviously, monitor events in Melbourne for you. Meantime, projections suggest that Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party will return to power in Canada after a close-fought election. The opposition leader, Erin O'Toole, has conceded defeat, and Monsieur Trudeau has said the results show he has a clear mandate to get his country through the pandemic. The 49-year-old gambled on an early election in a bid to win an outright majority, but it thought he'd return a minority government. Jennifer Arcuri is set to give evidence today about her influence in City Hall during Boris Johnson's time as Mayor of London. It's expected the American businesswoman who has alleged that she had a 4-year affair with the now Prime Minister will be questioned by the London Assembly's Oversight Committee about her role on foreign trade missions led by Mr Johnson. The point is that Prince Andrew is said to have been served with a sexual assault lawsuit after the relevant paperwork was delivered to his US lawyer. The Duke has denied the allegations against him. Well, our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills joining us now from Buckingham Palace. Challenging few days ahead for the Prince, not least because he's just become a grandfather with one of his daughters and can't go down to see her.
Yeah, so there was the happy news yesterday that Princess Beatrice gave birth to a baby girl in London over the weekend. But for Prince Andrew, it's raised questions about where exactly is he. And we know that for the last couple of weeks, he's been in Scotland, as we've seen that legal toing and froing, the disagreements between his lawyers and lawyers over in America as to whether or not that sex abuse compensation case has been properly served against him. Yesterday, late in America, more court documents were filed, which Virginia Giuffre's lawyers say prove that the case has now been served properly. Documents showing that the LA lawyer has received those documents. Also, other photographs showing the legal papers that have been filed to the High Court here in London. Obviously, we know that the court in the States has said that Virginia Giuffre's lawyers can ask the High Court for help to serve those papers as well. And Prince Andrew's legal team have until Friday to appeal against that. However, it has to be said, for the royal family, there are other things happening this week that they would far rather that we are focusing on, and that includes a very poignant tribute that many of them have been involved in to Prince Philip, a documentary that will go out tomorrow night, an hour-long documentary where, in essence, his grandchildren and children narrate his life in their own words and lets in on a few family secrets. I've watched it, and it has to be said that the moments that they really light up is where they talk about his mischievous and cheeky side. Here's what Prince William had to say about his grandpa.
When we used to go for family barbecues, instead of like a mustard pot, we had a mustard tube, a squeezy mustard tube. And he used to take the lid off and put it in your hands.
He gets you to hold it.
Gets you to hold it.
And then he'd squish your hands together to fire the mustard into the ceiling.
It goes all over the ceiling.
He used to get in a lot of trouble from my grandmother for covering most of the places we had lunch and things with mustard on the ceiling.
Watching a preview of the documentary, it really reminded me of the days after Prince Philip died, where the family were surprisingly warm about him, very publicly, in a way that we don't normally expect from members of the royal family. But you can't help but think what Prince Philip would think about it all, as Camilla describing him as the epitome of the stiff upper lip.
OK, for now, thank you. We've been following this story for you throughout the last few days. It's a volcano in La Palma in the Canary Islands. It's continued to erupt, spewing lava down the mountainside. This is what it's looking like today. Local firefighters captured this scene as the wall of lava moved through villages and towns. You'd definitely turn around, wouldn't you, if you saw that coming? The lava flow covered a large area. Around 5,000 people on La Palma have been evacuated to escape the erupting Cumbre Vieja volcano. Say it with conviction, people believe that's how you pronounce it. Officials said about 100 properties had so far been destroyed and no deaths or injuries have been reported. Airlines and travel firms are reporting a surge in interest after the US announced that it will relax restrictions for passengers entering from the UK and the EU from November. Our correspondent Milena Veselitovic joining us now from the US Embassy just across the river here in southwest London. Hello to you, Milena. Thank you for updating us this morning. It came as a bit of a surprise yesterday, though, didn't it?
Yeah, when Boris Johnson spoke to reporters on his way to America, he said he wasn't really holding his breath that this would happen. And lo and behold, this announcement came. So, you can take your own conclusions as to how closely the two governments worked on this. But nonetheless, it's excellent news for anyone who has been separated from their loved ones with this travel ban, which lasted by about 18 months. All foreign visitors will have to show proof of vaccination before they board the plane. They'll also need a negative COVID-19 test taken within 3 days of their departure. Airlines will be collecting contact tracing information, but once you're in the US, there's no need to quarantine. Now, the America's Centers for Disease Prevention and Control will decide whether jabs that haven't been approved in the US, like the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, which many Brits have, will count under this system. But Downing Street said that they were confident that they would be accepted. And as you mentioned, their travel firms reporting spikes in interest. British Airways 700% surge in searches for holidays to the US. Virgin Atlantic said they've actually seen a rise in 91% in actual bookings within the hour of the announcement. And even EasyJet, that doesn't even fly to the US, has seen their shares spike. Clearly a sign that the travel industry has taken that the recovery is now well and truly underway, Kay.
OK, thank you. I want to tell you in a little bit more detail now about why the United States has done what it's done. Joining us now from San Francisco is Peter Chin Hong, Professor in Infectious Diseases at the University of California. Hello to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Why do you think now has been the time that this has happened, Professor?
Well, I think there are multiple factors driving this particular announcement. First and foremost, it is a big business. I mean, travel to the U.S. from other countries has led, probably accounts for about $500 billion. And one of my colleagues quipped, New York is open, but it's not really open until the tourists are here. So that's part of it. So it's much business as humanitarian. And of course, there are a lot of educational institutions that suffered because they haven't been scientists, students, PhD, postdocs traveling back and forth who are non-American citizens. So I think all of this would hopefully lead to more bidirectional exchange of information, but also business.
So many people have died of COVID-19, of course, in both countries, particularly in the United States, particularly under the previous regime. One wonders why it's safe now.
Well, I think that, that is the question of what's changed now. I think what became apparent is that many of the developed countries exceeded the US in terms of overall population vaccinated. So it seems sort of strange when you're allowing folks to come from probably more vaccinated people, and you're not allowing them. And so I think that was leading to a lot of tension, and now that tension is a little bit lifting. Of course, the timing is interesting as well. Now that there's a little bit more tension with the United States around some of the political issues. So I think Biden's hoping for more support towards donation of the global effort towards vaccinating the world. So I think this is part of making nice, so to speak.
Yeah. What about AstraZeneca as a vaccination, though? That was one of the areas of concern as well, wasn't it? It wasn't necessarily being recognised as a vaccine in the United States as opposed to Moderna and even Pfizer.
I think the CDC is going to look at the list, but it is expected that AstraZeneca would be included. But that doesn't mean that all WHO vaccines will be either. I'm worried about Sinopharm, Sinovac, some of the generic manufacturers, Covaxin, Covishield from India. I mean, these are decent vaccines. And, you may get the situation where you have an over-vaccinated group of tourists coming to the US. And, there's a theoretical risk of immune exhaustion if you give people too many vaccines.
What is the situation with COVID in the United States at the moment? A lot of people double jabbed. Are you already looking at booster jabs?
Yeah, so we're expecting the CDC decision to rule on boosters either this Wednesday or Thursday. It will apply first to those who are 65 and older, and in 2 additional populations. Those whose work put them at increased risk for COVID exposure, like healthcare workers, as well as those with multiple medical comorbidities. So not everyone in the population. I think the FDA was being very science-driven, although they did include some of the other populations, like healthcare workers, who are not included in the science. And I think people are sort of, not rushing down to get boosters, so to speak. It's probably going to lead to a modest increase in vaccinations. But again, you have 80 million Americans who are not vaccinated. So it's kind of like a seesaw where, there's a lot of people on one end, but not having a lot of, bi-directional movement, so to speak.
And a quick thought, Professor, on vaccinating children, topic of contention here in the United Kingdom, 12 to 15-year-olds being vaccinated from this week. What's the situation in the US?
Well, the debate right now for the 12 to 15-year-olds in the US is whether or not they'll be mandated to get vaccines in school districts. The LA school district, the Unified School District of LA, the second largest school district in the country, recently announced a mandate for that particular age group. And certain areas in the San Francisco area also noted some similar mandates. So I think it's not fully FDA approved yet, but I think many people, depending on where you live in the country, are supportive of it. Of course, today's announcement of the data for 11 to 5-year-olds does, again, lead to the idea that schools eventually are going to have this as part of a mandate.
Good to talk to you, Professor. Thank you for staying up late for us. We appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed, joining us live from San Francisco.
Thanks so much, Kate.
Did you know that air pollution isn't just bad for the environment, it's bad for our health too?
It will be a chilly start today with some early mist and fog patches. Most places will have a dry day with brighter sunny spells, and it will feel warm in the light winds. Thicker cloud, brisk winds and outbreaks of rain will spread to northwestern areas later. Taking a look at the daily air quality index, where levels of air pollution are banded from 1 being low to 10 being very high, air pollution levels are expected to remain low today, although there may be the odd elevated pocket near busy roads and urban centres.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Talking about youngsters and teenagers just a second ago. Not a lost generation, but a roll-up-their-sleeves heroic generation. That's how the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza, described Britain's young people who've lived through COVID. It comes after she launched a survey asking 500,000 children about how the pandemic had impacted on them. Dame Rachel is with us now. Hello to you, Dame Rachel. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. We hear a lot about kids at the moment being part of a lost generation. Tell us about your survey.
So this survey is the biggest survey of its kind ever done in the world in terms of its response rate. So more than 500,000 children in England from 4 to 18 have responded to us and told us about both what they want coming out of lockdown to thrive and what they want for their futures. And you're absolutely right, it's not a lost generation. So more than 80% of them have told us that they're happy or okay, but mainly happy. And there's an amazing cohesion about what they want for their futures across all gender identity groups and all locations. You know, they want to get back to school. They want great places to play, to go out, things to do. They've got real ambitions and hopes for their futures, and they want to create a greener, fairer world. It's fantastic. They're not a lost generation. They're not a snowflake generation. They told me that explicitly. I think they are a heroic generation, and I say that because of what they've endured during the pandemic. And they've come out of that period of isolation, not having school, not seeing family, all the things that have worried them and upset them, and they've come out of that stronger and really positive and really ready to sort of try and, you know, move forward with the country. And I think we need to listen to them and make sure we meet their needs and put them at the centre of policy making. It's time for them now.
And how does it depend, or how much does it depend on their living conditions or their family situation?
Yeah, so I mean, what's really interesting is even the most children from poorer backgrounds, more disadvantaged backgrounds, children in care, have come up with the same top things that they want. They want good physical and mental health. They want a good education. They want support for their education. They want places to go, things to do. And a massive 70+% of them are saying the biggest issue for them is getting the support they need so they can get the jobs they need for their future. They're very focused on their careers. And trust me, there's no lack of ambition in England's children. I met the next Elon Musk when I was out talking to children. I went from Grimsby to Handsworth to Bristol to Gateshead, everywhere, and that they're really ambitious. Lots of them saying, give us more vocational pathways. We want trades as well, and we want really good jobs. So, you know, there's amazing cohesion. And yes, more vulnerable children, are more concerned, say, with family life, thinking more about having a greater family when they're older, particularly children in care. But in the main, the responses are really similar, which is great. And we've got a generation that we know what to do, how to listen to, and how to look after.
How glad are you to see the back of Gavin Williamson?
Oh, I thought Gavin was great, and I'm really pleased to see Nadeem Zahawi take up post. He received our report yesterday, and I'm really confident that he's going to be delivering for children. This is a time when we all have to work together: public services, ministers, governments, opposition parties, to do the best for children. I'm the Children's Commissioner. I'm here to be the voice of children and work with anyone and everyone to really get the best deal for children.
Are you sure that you thought he was great at his job? One wonders why he got sacked.
I worked with him. I thought he was a good man.
How do you feel about 12 to 15-year-olds having vaccinations?
Yeah, so that's really, really important. Two things. One, I'm not a scientist, but I think we definitely always need to follow the science, whether we're talking about school closures, whether we're talking about vaccinations. Lots of 12 to 15-year-olds, and I've been out around the country, have told me they want to be vaccinated. I think this is a decision that parents and children need to take together. The big thing I want to see is really good material that children can understand to help them make this decision well, and that's what my office is going to be pushing for.
OK, good to talk to you, Dame. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Hopefully you'll be able to join us in the studio next time we see you. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, me too. CO2. We'd know more about it today than we normally do, don't we? And that is because apparently we need it for our food supplies. And if we don't get it, then we're not going to have pork and the like and fresh lettuce and stuff on our shelves by the end of the week. And that is because A factory is not producing its CO2 because they can't get the gas at the right price. All very complicated, isn't it? What are we going to do about it? This is what Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, told me.
We're definitely looking at trying to secure carbon dioxide supply. And
what does that look like?
Well, I think we're getting there. I mean, I spoke to the Chancellor yesterday, spoken to the CEO of the business, an American man. It's pretty imminent, but I'm confident that
today, tomorrow?
In the next this week, I hope we have a very clear plan.
So, crisis. What crisis? We heard from Kwasi Kwarteng saying he's basically going to fix it by the end of the week. We will see, won't we? We'll have more on that coming up in the next hour here on the programme. Also, we'll be taking you to the Chelsea Flower Show as well. After a break, I should say, for the pandemic, the show is back. Not normally in September, but it is this year. Opens to the public in southwest London today. Obviously, great big pumpkins and the like. Stars have turned out in force, including plenty of royalty. Princess Anne and the Earl and Countess of Wessex were all spotted at yesterday's preview event. Her Majesty not there. The reason for that is because it's a little bit too late in the year for her. RuPaul's Drag Race star Crystal was there as well, DJing. Follow that if you can. I'll try at 8.